Hello children, how are you all? Welcome back to our online class. In last class, previous class, we studied about the natural realms of the earth. 9th class, second lesson. Main points are main spheres: lithosphere, hydrosphere, atmosphere and biosphere. We observed these four spheres in previous class, and in detailed manner we are discussing about lithosphere. And this lithosphere is we observe this layer or this sphere on the surface of the earth crust. Okay, and in this lithosphere we already studied about these points: landforms, moving of plates, sea floor spreading, drama at the margins, and slow movements and sudden movements. And we observed these slow movements in continental plates movements and sudden movements, earthquakes and volcanoes. Now we observe some volcanoes, important volcanoes. Names of important volcanoes in the world: Stromboli in Sicily, Mount Pili, West Indies, Mount Vesuvius, Italy, Fusiyama in Japan, Cotopaxi in Ecuador, Mayan in Philippines, Barren Narcondam in India, Kilimanjaro in Tanzania. These are the main important volcanoes in the world. Okay children? Next, the Pacific Ring of Fire. What is the Pacific Rim? Rim means edge. Here, the Pacific Ring of Fire. Pacific Ocean. We know about. We know that the Pacific is the largest ocean among all the oceans. Okay. See, if you observe, this is Pacific Ocean. And the edge of the ocean. The edge of the ocean is called rim. Rim is nothing but the edge. Okay. So this boundary or edge. This is the largest ocean among all oceans, Pacific Ocean. And on the edge of the Pacific Ocean, see, geologists observed for many decades and noted the high number of earthquakes and volcanic activity occurring around the Pacific Rim. See what we are observed here. These are continents. And this is Pacific Ocean, and the edge of the Pacific Ocean, most of the earthquakes and volcanoes lie with Pacific Ocean also. World's most of the active volcanic lie with Pacific Ocean. And geologists also observed this and noted this. Number of earthquakes and volcanic activity occurring around this Pacific Ocean edge or Pacific rim. So that's why it is called the Pacific Ring of Fire. See children, this is a Pacific Ring of Fire. Why? Because this is the edge. This is the edge of the Pacific Ocean, and this is the boundary line, nothing but boundary line between continents and the Pacific Ocean. So this edge is called Pacific Ring of Fire. Next children, the external processes. See, on the surface of the earth, some changes occurs because of force of the water and wind. Some changes occurs on the outer surface of the earth, on the surface of the earth. Okay. See, external forces like water and air are working vigorously to wear away the surface, and the interaction of the forces gives rise to the great diversity of present day landforms. Okay, so here this water has some force and wind also has some force. Okay, and many landforms formed because of force by the water and wind. And rocks and mountains, outer layers of the rocks and mountains, because of water and wind, what happens? Outer portions or outer layers separated from the main rock, and particles from that rock or mountain, what happens? Transported and deposited in lands and basins. Okay, and here, see, in previous class we discussed about first order landforms and second order landforms. First order landforms are continents and oceans. Second order landforms are mountains, plateaus, plains. And plains. See, we here in external processes, some changes occurs in mountains and rocks, and some new landforms we can see on the land or surface of the earth because of the force of wind and water. Okay, so these third order landforms are shaping of the landforms by wind and water. Okay. These third order landforms are carved mountains, valleys, carved mountains, valleys and deltas and also basins. These are called third order landforms. Okay. See, these third order landforms formed because of wind and water, force of the wind and water. Okay, and here we can observe next these landforms. These third order landforms. What are the main reasons to occur like these third order landforms are? First one, weathering. Second one, erosion. And third one, transportation. Fourth one, deposition. Deposition. First one, weathering. Second one, erosion. Third one, transportation. Fourth one, deposition. These are the main reasons. These are the main reasons are responsible. Main reasons. Main reasons to occur or to make these third order landforms. These are the main reasons. These are the main reasons. How these landforms made? What happens? What happens? We will discuss in this class. Okay, children. Here, processes like weathering, erosion, transportation, and deposition responsible for these landforms: carved mountains, valleys, deltas, sand dunes, etc. Okay, these are the main reasons to form these landforms. Okay, so first one is weathering. See, weathering is the processes by which the rocks are weakened and broken are called weathering. Okay, see, if rocks are very hard, because of water, wind and temperature or heat or coolness, what happens? Outer portion of the rock becomes weak. Then what happens? Because of heat, it expands. Outer layers expands. Because of heat, outer layers of the rock or mountain expands. And because of coolness, that outer portion of the rock becomes contracts. Okay, so these expansion and contracts. Okay, what happens? Rocks become weakened. Then and also it becomes brittle. Okay, and begins to break down like this. If I will show you one stone. Now see this small rock, children. See this is a small rock, but once it is a big rock. Okay, because of heat it expands, and because of coolness it contracts. So because of contracts and expands, it became brittle like this. Okay, see, particles from this rock separated because of expansion and contraction. Okay children. So like this rocks become brittle and begins to break down. So to this weathering process, water and moisture helps for this weathering process. Water and moisture helps for this process. Okay children. Next erosion. In the weathering process, outer portion becomes brittle. We already discussed about that. After that, the outer portion becomes brittle, and particles from that rock moves along with water. So that moving agents are called erosion. The active wearing away of Earth's surface by these moving agents is called erosion. And flowing of water and wind have great power. We know about that. Wind has power, and also water has force and power, and speed also there. Okay, for water, speed also there, and this flowing of water and wind have great power, and this power or force can cut the rocks soil cover in high mountains. Okay, in the rainy season, if we observe on the mountains, water comes from the mountain, and if there is a deep slope, water has more speed and force will be there. Okay, so and when it comes down from the mountain, it cuts the rocks and soil on the high mountain ranges. Okay, and water acts in many ways. What are they? Rain, rivers, flowing groundwater, sea waves, glaciers. Okay, these are many ways we can see. We can observe water in many ways. So this is erosion. See here, if you observe the two small stones here, because of erosion, because of weathering and erosion, these rocks shapes and see outer portion became like this. Outer portion became very sharp and see very brittle also here. Next, third point, transportation. See, in weathering erosion, we observed the rocks becomes brittle and particles comes down along with water. Okay, see, this material or particles moves along with water. Okay, so this process, what we call transportation, the eroded material in the form of small rocks or pebbles or sand, also gravel, mud, fine soil, etc., carried by winds and water is called transportation. This process we can see everywhere. In nearby our houses also we can see. Okay, and both sides of the road. We can see that. Okay, and rivers and winds cut soil and rocks from one place and take them to distant places. Take them to distant places. If it is heavy rain, water flows very with force it flows, and if water has force, this transportation is very quick and very fast. Okay, and these particles along with water moving from one place to another place, and if there is force, it goes to distant places. If there is force, it goes to distant places. And if we observe in rainy season, if you observe in front of your house, and that upper portion of the soil moves along with water. Okay, so like this transportation is very clear to ourselves also. We can observe everywhere. If it is rainy season, we can observe in our nearby houses or nearby places also. We can observe this transportation. Next, deposition. Next one, deposition. Here, these debris or brittle particles from the top portions of the mountain or rocks flows along with water, and this material, if force of the water slow down, it get dumped. If the river or wind slow down, they do not have the force to carry the material, and they dump them. If there is no force for the water or speed of the water, what happens? Material, what they are moving along with water, it dumps where the force slow down. Okay, next, plains and river basins formed like this with dumped debris. So where there is a river basin, for many years this dumped debris came and plains and river basins formed like this with dumped debris. Next point, this dumped debris accumulate in the bottom and over time get transformed into sedimentary rocks. So this debris, for many years this debris moves along with the water and accumulates in the bottom of the river or in basin areas, and get transformed into sedimentary rocks. Get transformed into sedimentary rocks. Okay, so these 4 points, weathering, erosion, transportation and deposition, are responsible for the process of landforms. Third are the landforms: carved mountains, valleys, deltas, sand dunes, etc. Okay. Next, children, work of water. Next topic, work of water. See this picture. Work of water. The work of a river begins from its very source in the high mountains. The flow of a river is very swift as it descends the steep slopes, and it exerts a great force in cutting the mountain vertically. As a result, a deep valley develops. Here you see the picture. It is very narrow at the bottom and wide at the top. This is usually called a V-shaped valley. In this stage, water has such force that it can move even very heavy and hard rocks. Because of work of water, some shapes we can observe on the surface of the. See this picture. This is Grand Canyon. This also due to work of water. This shape occurred. What is this? Canyon, Grand Canyon. This is the biggest canyon in the world, and it is on the river Colorado. The Grand Canyon is 466 kilometers in length, and its depth is 1.6 kilometers and width is 188 meters to 29 kilometers. Okay children, this is a Grand Canyon of Colorado. And next children, in some cases where the rocks are very hard, the river cuts a very narrow valley. The sides are so steep that gorges are formed. In our state, Andhra Pradesh, there is one gorge, that is Bison Gorge. It is on the Godavari river. And also in our country, Indus Gorge is there, that is in Kashmir. And another important erosion form is canyon. The gorge is almost equal in width as its top as well as its bottom. In contrast, a canyon is wider at its top than at the bottom. The waterfalls are most numerous in the mountain areas where changes of slope are more abrupt. The waterfalls with great force and dig out the rock beneath to form a plung pool. See the lesson picture, children. The river enters the plain, the slope is gentle and the river also slows down. Now it does not have the force to carry heavy particles and deposits them on its bank or on its bed. Sometimes when the river is in flood, it has greater force and cuts the soil. And when it is not in flood, it deposits silt. A layer of sediment is thus deposited during each flood, gradually building up a fertile flood plain. This is how vast flood plains like the Ganga plain or the Krishna Godavari plains were made. When the flood water comes again, the river bed may have become too high as a result of the deposition. Then it changes its course and cuts new path. This results in the river constantly changing its course in a plane. In its floodplain, the river often forms meanders like this. See the picture, children. See this picture. Here, in its floodplain, the river often forms meanders. Gentle turns. Meanders are gentle turns like a snake. See the picture. Due to deposition along the sides of the meander, the ends of meander loop comes closer and closer. In due course of time, the meander loop cuts off from the river and forms a cut-off lake, which is called Oxbow Lake. This is Oxbow Lake. And when the river reaches the sea, the fine material which has not yet dropped is deposited at its mouth, forming a delta. The word delta is originated from the Greek alphabet delta. We already studied in previous classes, 7th class. What is delta? Before reaching or entering into the sea, river forms delta. The delta. So, because of work of children, see these 4 points: weathering, erosion, transportation and deposition. These are responsible for landforms, third order landforms like carved mountains, valleys, deltas and sand dunes. Now, we already discussed about these 4 points. These are the main reasons for the landforms, third order landforms. So, now I am going to give you few questions. Write answers in next class. I am writing questions. First one, what is called Pacific Ring of Fire? Pacific Ring of Fire. And second one is, what is called weathering? What is called? Third question is, which is the biggest canyon in the world? Which is the biggest canyon in the world? And fourth one is, what is called erosion? What is called erosion? So, first one, what is called Pacific Ring of Fire? Second one, what is called weathering? Third one, which is the biggest canyon in the world? And fourth one is, what is called erosion? Okay, children, write answers in your notebook. And read the lesson in your textbook. Okay, once again read the lesson from the beginning. Read the lesson and write the answers in your notebook. Okay, children. Next topic we will discuss in the next class. Okay, children.